Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left.
I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host, teacher in socialist Andy Lipson and community organizer in socialist Kenny Cepeda, as well as with Jessica, who has been a frequent contributor and now part of What's Left and has been a long-time animal rights and environmental activist. I'm so glad that I'm back with Jessica, having now been a part and will be a part moving forward with What's Left as one of our hosts. Thank you, Jessica, for being with us.
No, thank you, Eduardo.
So, Eduardo, what's our episode about today? After you so rudely interrupted me.
Well, first, I'd like to say where we're at. I don't know if you've always missed that, but people always we have to find out where we're at. So,
yeah.
You can find us at what-s-left@webnode.com, and you can find a link to our blog on the episode notes, as well as you can find any of our episodes there. Subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, share your favorite episode, jot down our information wherever you found this episode, and we expect you'll be following us. I forget what else. Now I'm getting clumsy. So I guess we'll be discussing me today, Andy.
Yes, it's the Welcome Back Eduardo episode. People have been missing you, Eduardo. We had people write in, say, what happened to Eduardo? Did he quit the show? Did you run him off because you were so mean? All that kind of stuff. So I had to say, no, he's just had a long trip. Yeah. And everyone's been saying, oh, is he back this week? Is he back this week? And now you're finally back. So I'm very happy.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And I do especially appreciate Jessica for having filled in the spot for me and just being with us now.
Yeah.
Big shoes to fill.
Yes. So we have some questions for you.
Sure.
And I'll start with the first one. First off, what's it like to be back? You were in Mexico, but what's it like to be back in the United States? And also, what's it like to be back here on What's Left right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's weird being back because I feel like time has paused, right? And I'm back where there's a time, what do you call it? When you a time machine, or I think of the X-Men films, when the mutants, when Professor X freezed time for a moment and then all of a sudden time resumed. Yeah. I feel that way, as if when I left in December, I then paused life or time for that moment and then did whatever I did, which I will share with you all. And then I'm back and whoa, after I'm back here where after time froze for some time. That's how I feel, honestly. That's how I'm just trying to recuperate. Besides that, I feel lots of nostalgia. I think anytime I go back home, it just feels to me like I want to live there. I want to stay there. I want to be with my family. I think when you return, well, at least I'll speak for myself. When I return, I think maybe Kenny, you can, because you've spoken about this sometime. There is this feeling like you're being ripped apart from your family, there is, most of my family lives in Mexico, and when you're there, you do everything together. There isn't a moment that I'm not with them. I'm not alone by myself. I don't want to be alone, and I'm very introverted, right? So I try to find space in my head, or when I wash dishes, to just be alone. But most of the time I'm with people. There's just a lot of people, and I have a big family, and I made a commitment a long time ago to, when I'm in Mexico, to just be with them, with all of them, from my father's side and my mother's side. And so I feel this deep sense of connection with them, and they feel it with me. And if they're watching this, I'll maybe add some subtitles for this. I think there's a deep sadness because they'll know that it'll be some time until I see them. It's not like I live there and I can just go visit them over a weekend and make plans with them. It's just I have to cross a border, no? And maybe that could be the subject of one of the subjects we discussed on borders. and workers, being restricted access to be amongst each other. And I think for me, the one thing I want in my life is there to be this unification of where I live in my community here and the community that I have there to be in one. But it's sort of challenging when there's, cultural differences, language, and distance, etc. So coming back, no, right? Sorry, Kenny. Just coming back is like full of nostalgia. I remember getting off the plane and just like feeling like a damped, very heavy plant that's just, and then just remember just going to my home and just lying in bed, just thinking, oh my goodness, I wish I could have more time. Kenny, you were going to say?
Yeah, when was the last time you were back home in Mexico?
Yeah. So the last time was 2019, 2019, because every year I try to go back to Europe to try to either be in the UK or in France. And I went into Mexico in 2019, and then I went to France in December and stayed until January, and then Spain in January, and then back to France. And then I got COVID at the hostel in France. And I had planned to go back home when was it? I think it was that spring or that summer, but then they closed the border because of COVID, and they did the whole, no flying out, non-essential travelers. Right. So when the borders closed over the summer, I was very disappointed. And then I was waiting for some time until they would reopen, but then we got caught up in the reopening of schools and the learning part, So I became very busy, and I didn't realize that my Mexican passport and my US American passport were expired. So because they were expired, to get those things, the Mexican embassy completely shut down. They weren't going to do anything at that time, I think it was. And then I tried to get the US American passport because I have dual citizenship. I tried to get the US American passport as a renewed US American passport, but then that delayed some time, and because there was so many changes happening in 2020. So I got it in 2021, and somewhere around there, and winter of 2021, I think, or December, January. And then I just got caught up in the reopening of schools. So we were, organizing, we were doing stuff here in SF in the Bay Area, and I was meeting up with families and, trying to push for the reopening of schools here in San Francisco. So I just felt I got too overwhelmed, and I didn't travel. And so 2021 was, I didn't go anywhere. I didn't go abroad after France, didn't go abroad after 2020, didn't go abroad 2021. So I thought, no, I have to go. I can't be here. I feel stuck. I feel, so I decided to go in December. I made plans, to go in December.
I just have a question as to at least that was true for me. Like that first year, I knew some things didn't add up in terms of, the narrative of COVID. And so, but still I was a little more anxious, and still had more doubts in my mind as to if I could visit elders. Like I didn't visit my grandma for a year, in Los Angeles, right? Because especially my stance on vaccination, was that at all factor into your not going to Mexico? Like, was there any doubt? Because I know you have some elders down there.
My great grandfather lives in the state of Morelos, just 3 hours south of, not the state, but in the small town where I grew up in Amacuzac, outside of Cuernavaca, the largest city out of the state of Morelos, 3 hours south of Mexico City. I wasn't worried about him so much because he's isolated, and I know his daughter, my aunt, takes care of him very, very well. What I was worried more so about was the hysteria, or the paranoia, the getting to him, because he's very laissez-faire about things and diseases. I mean, he does take care of himself, and my aunt is very extremely, protective. But in Mexico, what people, this is the sentiment of a lot of Mexicans, and if any Mexicans are hearing this, and maybe in other Latin American countries, I'm not sure, but what people were dying from were not necessarily from COVID. They were dying because of separation and being locked up in hospitals in ICU care. And so that was some fear from my family, that if something were to happen to him, that they would be separated from him. And I know lots of Mexican families that decided to keep their loved ones at home and just, whatever, however, I hope this is not something that I recommend for people to do, and we might get this post taken down or something. I don't want that. But this is what Mexican families did. They kept their older ones at home, safe, and instead of having them go to the hospital, because people were dying of COVID, as they were saying it, and so, but many family members would report on social media, on news, and just in neighborhood conversations, that they couldn't have died from COVID because they had already COVID. Either they had been immune, so they already had COVID, or they were dying from other illnesses because they were not seeing people for other treatments, or they were just dying from isolation because you're in the middle of lots of people, and there's no care. Everyone's being together, and you're isolated from your family. You're being you're just scared. So people kept their loved ones at home, and I think that's what I was afraid of, that they would take my great-grandfather to a hospital, and they would keep him there isolated, and then they would not let us see him. That was my biggest fear, because you're trusting health professionals, but then later people realize they don't. That's not what you should be doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would not say that's foolish. I actually think that makes a lot of sense. Like the stories I was hearing of people dying alone in a hospital, whether it's being placed on a ventilator, which they probably shouldn't have been placed on. There's a lot of stories like that. So actually, I don't think if people in Mexico were doing that, I think they did a wise thing.
Yeah, I agree. So I just wanted to ask, especially because I know traveling, as you were describing, has been such a huge part of your life and your identity and how you navigate the world. So did you, for those 2 years that you were traveling, you talked about the literal restrictions in terms of crossing borders, but did you feel any cultural or personal pressure not to travel? I mean, I know your stance was obviously not in the majority, not the mainstream stance, but I don't know, did you still feel that pressure of I'm not supposed to?
Yeah, I think we even feel it here, right? We're not supposed to go to parks. We're not supposed to go to restaurants. We're not supposed to hang out together. We're not supposed to do anything. What I think, when people would tell me, "Oh, you are unvaccinated, why are you traveling?" I think, why were you traveling when you were a teacher and going to Puerto Rico and Cancun, teaching 1 hour or 2 hours a day, and when you were unvaccinated, and that's what pissed me off. And then suddenly, telling me because I'm unvaccinated, you were unvaccinated in 2020 and you were traveling. Or I think of all the fakeness of teachers, at my nephew's school who are afraid of children who are unvaccinated, and they're in other classrooms when they're not supposed to be in other classrooms. You're supposed to be isolated. You're not supposed to be interacting with your colleagues after school. I mean, I don't care, but you're the one who cares, and you're the one who keeps saying you're not supposed to be around each other, So, all these restrictions and the pressure of not going anywhere and not to travel, the hypocrisy of people and telling me what to do and what to do with my life when they would not even follow it themselves. I know some people who are, strong COVID, they follow to the T, yes, and that's very the small percentage, but the majority of people who advocate for lockdowns and school closures, and they're always traveling and they're always going to restaurants and they're always having fiestas at their houses, and I know it. And so, and and one teacher in particular who would criticize me for being unvaccinated and going about places, she's shaking her booty up in Hawaii, you know. I mean, it's true. Like, people are just doing the things that they want to do, and they're being hypocritical about it, telling other people what to do. So, I was going to do what I was going to travel, but I got caught up with our political advocacy for the reopening of schools and our, just life in general. I think if you just don't go, you keep thinking all the reasons why you should not go, then you're never going to go. Oh, I have my nephew, I have this, I have to do that before I have to go. So I think that I did feel the pressure, but I thought of all the times I'd see them doing, what, like as if they were able to do anything because they're vaccinated. So I did, I went to go see my family. The worst, it's like Kenny shared, remember? The thing is, your family means, or at least what Kenny shared and what I'm sharing is, and I'd like to hear from both of you how, if this is true for Jessica, because I haven't actually heard about your family and your experience with your family, or Andy, I've only shared it with you privately, but we shared in What's Left is that family is so important to us. And for me, I'm not going to allow myself to be hindered or stopped to go see them. That's the least thing I want to do during these times,
No, I mean, yeah, it's true. I mean, you guys, I don't know, like we share that, that's very, I mean, I still haven't gone back to Guatemala, and in part is because my family there has bought into the narrative, and being kind of, what do you call it? Like, really traumatized by the constant bombardment of news, because even though they're in Guatemala, they're American and European, and like actually the big players in media still influence the media down there. And so it's just kind of parroting of whatever's happening here. And so the anxiety was there. My family I think until now, maybe more recently, because now everyone's has gotten COVID, and no one in my family has died from COVID. People with like very severe comorbidities, actually, that supposedly, they're the most at risk, right, according to the narrative, and they've survived it. And so by now it's like, now it's just about money, but it's also a factor of COVID, or the narrative of COVID. And so my point is that there was some resistance from my family from us going there. And so I guess that becomes a question for you, Eduardo. Was there at all any resistance from your family from coming over, right? Because Mexico never closed really its borders. People were still going on vacation. Mexico is not as strict, right, in terms of going there. I know a lot of people that have been traveling back and forth. And so what I'm curious about is whether your family had some resistance because of this constant bombardment. Like, was there any portion of your family at all for you, to come over?
Minimal. I think it wasn't so much pressure of not visiting them. It was more pressure of getting vaccinated, because some of them have bought into the idea that vaccines are the cure, when many of my family members, after after the third booster, they still got COVID. So the ones that telling me to get vaccinated were the very ones who were also getting COVID after the third shot. And I would ask them, well, how has it protected you? And then they kind of stumbled around what to say. So, it wasn't so much pressure of not visiting. Only my one aunt, but more so it was the vaccine. They wanted to get the vaccine. They wanted me to get the vaccine. So I don't think it was any pressure from my family like that, thinking. Not really. What I remember having more so conflict, or what was polemic was our stance on COVID. And a lot of them feel, take masking, for example. A lot of my family members feel like we were walking into public transport. There's no enforcement to wear a mask on public transport. There isn't any enforcement to wear a mask to a restaurant. But a lot of them wear it, and because there's this campaign, this news on television constantly to do it for others. So it's a constant bombardment of propaganda being said, like, do it for others. We're doing it for others. We're doing it because we love others. We're doing it for our neighbor. We're doing it for your family. We're doing it for your abuelita. So there is that. And I think that that's so ingrained that some of them would just put it on immediately as we got out the house. And I said, you know, there aren't any people for kilometers away. Why are you wearing it? And they said, oh, yeah, and they would take it off. But so I think it's more so how much has been programmed, but they're not, but that's not how, you know, it's that would be the issues I would run across. It would be around that. I think one thing that in the very beginning, as soon as I arrived, I had like this whole reunion with my primos hermanos, which are your cousins from your cousins of your parents' siblings. And we met up, and that night we were playing games and all, but the topic of COVID came up, and we're in a WhatsApp group. And if you're Latino and you know, you have WhatsApp, there's like so many groups you belong to, and there's just so many messages that you're a part of. And it's like, oh my God, it's like keeps going forever. And in one of our groups, and you have so many in groups that where your tia's not part of it because you don't get along with her or whatever, or because this family doesn't get along with this, or because etc., 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 etc. For so many, you know what I'm talking about, Kenny. So, so I'm a part of this WhatsApp group, and it's called Primos Sanchez, and we're all my grandmother's, the older ones. We're all my grandmother's, how do you say nietos? Grandchildren, and we've discussed COVID. And so when we met up in person, it was this back and forth. It was like a power struggle. Like I said, you know, I'm posting this stuff up on YouTube and I'm censored and I can't post things up on YouTube if we're not going, if it's unfactual. So obviously I'm right. And then they would say, well, then they would argue with me, and it became vaccine versus unvaccine, but there's no like cutting off ties. There's no friendship ties. Like here with people, and I've said this before, I've lost friends. I've lost community because people are so staunch pro-vaxxers, COVIDian, you know, activists here, you know, people who, you know, just beg to be injected, you know, who are like addicts of this stuff, you know, that, you know, they kind of remind me of the people under the bridge that are just wanting these needles, you know, these needle loving people. So these are the people who are staunchly saying, no, I'm not going to be your friend anymore because you're not vaccinated. But we were hugging and kissing in 2020, you know. And I've said this already before, but I'm always going to say it because whoever's listening should remember that. And my cousins in Mexico, they don't care. You know, we became divided, but then we hug and we love each other. It's strange. It's very strange.
I don't think that's strange. I think that's how it should be.
It should be. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I have a question. So you went to Mexico. You were not in just one place, right? You traveled Mexico, like to
Yeah, I went to Michoacán, the state of Michoacán. I went to Guanajuato, the state of Guanajuato. I went to El Estado de Mexico, which is like weird state. It's a state that surrounds the capital. It's like Washington, D.C., but with one circular state surrounding Washington, D.C., and that's called the state. So I went to El Estado de Mexico, and then I went to Morelos, and that's 4 states and the capital. So I was in 5 different regions.
What was this plan? Like, did you know? Because I had no idea. Like, I was just getting my information through Libsyn. It's like,
yeah,
the horizon's that back. he's not back yet. And like, did you plan this at all, or?
Yeah, like, well, no, I didn't plan it. I think I just went because my family lives in many regions, and so I decided to have road trips. I decided to drive, get my father's car, and have road trips to different, just like here, you go to Arizona to go to Albuquerque. Is that where Albuquerque is?
Mhm.
Arizona.
Mm.
Yeah.
New Mexico.
New. I, cut. No, you go to Las Vegas, or you go to LA, and then you go to Las Vegas, and then you go, and then you maybe go across the USA, like in Mexico as well. I got my dad's car at my grandmother's house, and I decided, I'd go from state. We went to Michoacan to go see the sanctuary of the butterflies, which is a very symbolic, Latin American, a symbol, because there's the monarch butterfly that travels from Mexico to all the way to Canada, back and forth for the different seasons. That's a symbol of no borders and people migrating. And so I went to go see that. That was special to me. And I went to Guanajuato, to San Miguel de Allende, to go spend time there with my cousins. And then I went to Morelos to go see my great-grandfather in the state of Morelos. And then I went to Querétaro. That was the other place. So 6 places to go spend time with my other family members there. And then I just all around Mexico City. And driving in Mexico City is like being, I posted this on Facebook, it's like being in a video game. You have to constant be on the lookout. And there's buses that are like, just centimeters away from you. And so, but to answer your question, Kenny, yes, I went there with the idea, a vague idea, that I wanted to be in all the regions where my family was at, but it wasn't, planned concretely out. It just happened as time unfolded.
And you expected, if I remember right, did you expect to be back by early February or something like that?
The plan was to return for the 20th of January.
Oh, wow. So can you say something about, well, first of all, I mean, it does sound like you had a great trip in terms of reconnecting with your family, a different experience of how to be with people. So much broken community here in the Bay Area. You've lost broken so many ties, and to have those ties reaffirmed, even in the face of differences of opinion. I mean, that would be a big deal. I could see that. So, I mean, that sounds like it was a great experience. Did you stay longer because you just didn't want to leave, or did you feel like there was something, that was important to just, well, I don't know. What was your reason?
I didn't feel like I had enough time. So I wanted to stay. So I basically paid for my flight, just $50, just to be moved over to another date, to be moved over to the 18th of February. And then I got sick. So then I couldn't come back for some time, and then I had to postpone my flight. And the airline, Aeromexico, was in February. You were allowed to just change your flight without any issue. If you just said you had COVID, you were just allowed to change it, which I didn't know at the time. So I went to go get a COVID test that you have to pay for. Unlike here, you have so many sites to get COVID PCR tests or antigen tests. In Mexico, you have to get a free COVID test. You have to queue up real early in the morning, like 3 a.m., 5 a.m., and you have to sit there in your blanket and you have to wait. And lots of workers who are, restaurant workers, lots of workers who work in homes in rich areas, they have to get these COVID tests. So they have to queue up early, or you can go to un doctor particular, which is a private doctor, and you pay from anywhere from 500 pesos to 1,000 pesos, which end up being like $25 to $50, more or less. So that's expensive. And if you're Mexican, 500 pesos goes a long way. If you're part of the working class, and that's a lot. So I do appreciate that SF has. Well, first of all, I don't know if we should be all getting tested. That's the thing. So the root of the problem is the testing. But there is, if you're going to get required, unlike Austria and Mexico, you don't have, here in SF, you don't have to pay for those things. You have anywhere you can get a test. Well, and the other thing too is, you can add this if you want or not, but you can also just pay for negative or positive tests. So
yeah.
Or you can get other other documents.
But did you actually get sick, or did you just test positive?
I had symptoms. I had symptoms, but I'm not sure if I was sick. I felt a lot of the people who had symptoms like colds would get cued, and a doctor would go about and would just write down your symptoms. And just to make things fast, they would just say, well, you most likely have COVID. So they would make it positive. So I saw that happen a lot.
Yeah.
And when I went to a small booth, that's what they did with me. So I was disappointed. So I had a positive test, and I thought, okay, well, I'll just use it to extend my trip some if that's what I have. And sort of disappointed, but not. It was kind of in between, because I did want to get home. I have things to do here, but at the same time, I wasn't that like worried. Like, okay, I'll just take some more time with my family.
So you didn't actually test positive at the airport, is that what you're saying?
Mm-mm.
So they just look at your symptoms, and then they're like, you probably have COVID, you can't travel.
Mm-hmm.
You went to get tested afterwards, right? And then you're a papaya, so you had. How severe were your symptoms? I mean, what were you feeling?
I had I had runny nose. I sometimes trembled at night. I was cold and hot. And that's it. I mean, I sneezed a lot, but that's quite common, because sometimes when I stay at my family's homes, some of them that have very humble or their dwellings are not very, sometimes they don't have their home structures are not built fully. So, for example, the painting isn't, or they don't have scaffolding. Sometimes it's just like a cement concrete home. And so concrete over time disintegrates, right? So you have a lot of dust. And so I would sneeze a lot in the morning. Or in Mexico City is very contaminated, because of migration, it's contaminated. So in the mornings, I sneeze a lot. And so people immediately look at me like, you have COVID or you have symptoms. And I said, no, I sneeze a lot because that's what happened. It's like when I was in the UK, because I'm not acclimated to the pollen that happens in Europe during the springtime, I get very strong allergies. I already get allergies here in the USA, but I get very strong allergies, and like my eyes and my nose and everything, I get very puffy. And in Mexico, the other thing happens is just dust. I just sneeze. There's a lot of cement. Homes are built out of cement. There's just a lot of dust. Sometimes you have multiple homes being built on top of each other. It's like, especially my grandmother's colony in her neighborhood, it's like a favela. The streets are so small and homes are on top of each other and built all over each other. And there's constant building. So just it's contamination and stuff. So people would attribute that to COVID. And so I thought maybe, okay, that doesn't make sense for me to be, with the symptoms on my checklist. But maybe I had a small cold. I'm not sure. I can only say for sure I've had COVID 3 times, which have been tested here in, July last year, France, and in August of last year, when you all saw me just like constant. I was really sick that time. But this last time, I don't think I don't know what it was. I was just labeled COVID.
Well, so I would like you to talk about, you can talk about if there's more you want to say about your trip in Mexico. I am curious what your experience was like in terms of your experience of the whole moment of the place we are right now in with regards to COVID, Fourth Industrial Revolution, mandates, data collection, all that kind of stuff. So when I went to Cancun, I was pretty surprised at how much there was masking in the places. Mm-hmm. Like the places would kind of like check you, that temperature checks at grocery stores, and people queued up for the temperature checks, and people had to be masked inside. And I couldn't get into I almost wasn't able to get into a outdoor Aztec ruin kind of thing, since I didn't have a mask. Like the guard was like, pull me out of the line. And a woman was nice enough to give me a mask because I left it in the car. So that was my experience in Cancun, but that's a tourist kind of thing. I'm wondering how you would, what is the kind of attitude that you experienced where you were or around where you were. That's number one. Number two, do things like the Ottawa truckers, did that get down to Mexico, or was that a discussion point? I'm curious because, well, certainly in some ways, maybe it wasn't even a discussion point here because it was kind of censored. But I am curious about that as well.
Yeah. Well, first, I think I should say that Mexico has one of the most relaxed COVID-19 entry restrictions in the world. It's different in contrast to the USA. So I think the attitude is similar to AMLO's in many aspects. It's AMLO is the president of Mexico. It's that there is an awareness, there's cognizance of the virus, but there isn't a strict approach to it. And if you go to touristy areas, yes, I did experience that as well. Like if you go to Polanco, if you go to Condesa or Zona Rosa, which are the areas of Mexico City that are very, that are rich, that are also just very touristy. Like if you go to El Zócalo, if you go to restaurants around there, yes, they tend to be strict. I imagine Cancun, I haven't been in a while, was that way for that reason. No? It's trying to make it attractive for tourists who do have that mindset, for US Americans and for Europeans that have that mindset. Mm-hmm. I think that COVID should be something taken very seriously. So Mexico doesn't want to lose its tourist industry. They don't want to lose their tourists. You know? So I imagine it would be that way. But in the rest of the country, at least everywhere, like I said, I've been to, where was it? I said already, Querétaro, Morelos, Guanajuato, Michoacán, 4 of the states where I went. And yeah, I think it was 4 of the states. I said, yeah, 4 of the states where I went. The attitude isn't the same as in the tourist areas. I think if you go to a mall, like a centro comercial, yes, inside where you have H&M and you have Abercrombie and Finch and you have all of those, like if you go to the cinema, yes, it is strict. But there isn't a law in Mexico that exists that says you have to, like here, you have emergency powers that created laws to be able to say you have to be masked to enter certain places, like here in SF, right? There isn't a law. It's private businesses that enforce it. So if you want to go to, like I was going with my cousin who likes H&M clothing, I don't know why, but I went with her. And those sanitized places that, you know, I hate and get bored of, I went in with her and I was told to wear a mask as well. And as much as I resisted and I said, I don't want to, or I don't feel comfortable or whatever, I wanted to see how much I can push. They were very strict about it. And it's a US American business. So I imagine that the policy goes across the same for anywhere where it is internationally. But if you go to like a restaurant, a local, or if you go to anywhere in the neighborhood, no, there isn't anything that's enforced. I think people look at you as if you probably are not being considerate of others, but they don't. But those who see it as something that's like dangerous or something, they could get sick. And that's not the majority. In public transport here in Muni, immediately I tried to keep my mask off, and people looked at me and said, "You know, put your mask on." I did this just to see, and their public transport isn't the same. So it depends where you're at. I think that if you talk to most people, I think they think of it. There's a lot of conspiracies, and then there are people who do believe that COVID is real, but they are okay making satire or jokes about it, and it's very dark humor, you know. And I think that if any of those memes were shared here or on my Facebook, people would get freaked out, or they would think I'm sending propaganda or whatever. And these are people who got vaccinated. They themselves make fun of it. You know, they like 30th shot by the nurse, para tu propio bien, and you're like a skeleton. You know, it's like memes like that, or
cynicism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just, maybe it's Latino. I don't know what it is, but you know, these memes are shared and it's like, you know, 15th shot or whatever. And like, you know, and these are vaccinated people who are sharing it. So it's not like it's seen horribly. Even in the UK, I think sometimes when because I belong to another group with my friends from the UK, and they share things, and British humor also tends to be sort of that way, where it's like, it tends to be satirical, dark, and it's not outright funny. It's just subtle. And they they're willing to share things like that. But here, when I share it in a group chat or something with some of my friends here in San Francisco, they get offended. An offense, how could you share that? Yeah, how are you sharing that when millions of people have died? It's like,
yeah, exactly. It's information too, right?
Yeah, disinformation. Shame on you. It's like, oh God. Like even my grandmother, like who are in the very like risk level of getting COVID, they're not afraid. Like she said something funny. She said, todo esto lo están haciendo porque quieren subir el precio de las tortillas. They're they're doing all of this because they want to, she said, they're doing all this caos because they're trying to raise the price of the tortilla.
I just want to comment on that just because
Go ahead, Kenny.
that's something that happens in my family too. My mother makes comments like that where like they sound funny on the surface, but like they have a lot of wisdom in like, because she's talking about inflation, and like we're living through inflation right now, and so, and just back to those memes, same thing. My people from down there, some of whom are vaccinated, from Guatemala. My brother is the king of memes. He just has them all, like, they circulate with people, and there is like again, there is not this. There is people who are very serious about it, but by and large, it's most definitely not this tension that we live through here, like in San Francisco and like in the U.S. I would say that it is very much also related to the who has proximity to like Western and European, culture and connections. So the higher, the people, the more elite people who have more proximity, because even in San Francisco, and I say this carefully, and I don't know, you guys can judge if we keep this, but a lot of the places where people, like the lower class in San Francisco, the workers that make the city run, and the people that get paid the minimum wages, the places that they go to, because I also go there, the enforcement and the seriousness of COVID has never been like the same as in the more educated places, the way people are more the professional class, in some, I can tell you that, and I don't want to name names because I want to keep it that way. But, there is definitely some places of refuge for people, because I want to repeat it, and like, there's something that there are racial lines here, like the people that we reject at my business at work is usually people of color, Black and people, Latino people that are not vaccinated in this city or in the vicinity of San Francisco. There is an absolute, racial and socioeconomic line that is marked as to who is pushing the COVID propaganda, and who is kind of like just undermining it without really being loud.
Yeah. I mean, I'll share some of the memes. I think I'll post, and then I'll have translated parts to it. I'd like to share some. It's like Mexico, the place where classes are online, but fiestas are on. Fiestas are in person. It's just different take. It's funny, and I just love that. People get so, what do you call it? It's so like precious about being perfect, or they don't even keep up with their own restrictive selves. And anyhow, that's one thing I think is the sentiment in Mexico.
And well, would you say, so in some ways though, that cynicism, that satirical, like that dark humor, I remember hearing it from a person in Russia under, kind of what they felt with the tyranny of the Soviet Union in its late stages before it just completely got pushed off the stage. Really talked about how dark humor and dark comedy was actually a form of resistance to the government. And is that what's going on here? That's confused. Maybe it's a little confusing because you also said there were the people who would post these are people who actually got the shot. Although, did they get the shot because they wanted the shot, or they get the shot because they felt they had to have the shot? So I'm curious if you think that this these memes or this sentiment is a kind of hidden opposition to what's going on there, or just a cynicism about the state in general or about the world?
I think Mexico has a very healthy, like a real healthy distrust of government and officials. So they just make fun of or mock the way government talks about coronavirus. They make fun of the way that health officials talk about protecting yourselves. So, but they also not stupid. So they'll just, okay, I'll just take care of myself. So if I'm sick, I'm not going to go and see my grandmother or whatever. Like, or it might happen, but it didn't happen. Like people, it happens just the way it happens here, no? But people do take care of themselves in the way they do with health remedies. They figure out, they figure it out. Like I said, they keep their loved ones home instead of taking them to the hospital. But you said a question, and so it might be that's the way they deal. Like the humor is a way to deal with what happens in the country. It's to make fun of yourself. Mexican people just make fun of themselves for the way that their state of affairs are. The corrupt police, the politicians making false promises and lying to you, and all of these things happening. Omicron being very funny at the time. It was like robotic or whatever. Omicron's coming, for you. And whilst the USA was closing its borders to Africa, Mexico didn't close its borders in any single flight. Did not stop any flight from African countries. Yeah, I wanted to touch on what you said about the truckers convoy.
Oh yeah, right.
You mentioned them. So there isn't a resistance that way in Mexico because of this relaxed view of COVID. So I imagine if it was more restrictive, there would be a resistance like that. There isn't a resistance. So even though it was heard about in the news about what was happening in Canada or happening in the USA, it isn't something that there isn't a movement like that. The only movement there is that I thought was quite radical was our indigenous communities in more rural areas in Mexico, where they have said health officials are not allowed to come in and have their health campaigns. I think it's 4, if I remember correctly, where they can just block and ban health officials from coming in and making their campañas, their vaccine campaigns. So that is, I don't ever hear that in the USA happening. I don't think that would ever happen here, where I went and lived for some time in Idaho. It's a small town where they would just ban health officials from coming in and vaccinating children and people, right? So I don't think this country has that level of freedom and that level of, anarchy as many Mexican communities have. So that I think is the only resistance that I have heard of. But other than that, the only reason why, and that's just to answer another part of your question, Andy, the only reason why people do get vaccinated, mostly because of work.
Yeah.
It isn't because a high percentage of them, when I ask them, why did you get vaccinated, whether it be my family or people in the neighborhood or people in the community, people say, oh, because of work. That's the majority of people say. Now, of course, I'm just, one person, but I don't know what the surveys are. But that's the majority of people. And if you ask most Mexicans even here, if you ask them, that's the same thing. I mean, we've met some of the Latino families here, and they'll tell you it's because of work. Mm-hmm. Kenny?
I just wondered too if maybe travel is another reason, right? Because they do ask for these things to travel outside, like to places like the US. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's mostly for rich, more middle-class Mexicans that travel outside. They wanted to go see the Olympics, for example, or they want to go to Europe or whatever. They do get the vaccine. They were looking for Pfizer because we had the Russian vaccine in Mexico that was distributed, and that one was seen as like not as effective. And so the one that most middle-class elite Mexicans were getting were the Pfizer one. Moderna is not in Mexico. We don't have Moderna in Mexico. We have, we have the Russian one and Moderna and AstraZeneca. Mm-hmm.
Are they giving it to children? Is it
no
in the school?
No,
not at all.
Not right now. They have they don't have that right now. Right now, it's the adolescents and my age, my generation, which are the 30s, the 20s, and above, they're prioritizing the older people.
But I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Minister of Health actually was public about saying not for kids at one point. I don't know if he's changed that position, but at one point, the Minister of Health was opposed to vaccinating kids with COVID vaccines.
I'm not aware of it, but I wouldn't be surprised, Kenny. I wouldn't be surprised. It's not something that's very that's sought after.
I do remember hearing that in AMLO's cabinet, that there was this character who was saying this, and it wasn't really that out of step with AMLO's people.
Yeah. I'm reading here where it does say that Mexican government has recalled calls to vaccinate youths despite a court order. Yeah. So there is a resistance.
So
yeah.
I want to make an observation, or but to see what you think, because in the context, I don't know if you've seen these like the newscaster, a journalist on TV talking about what's happening in Ukraine, right? And talking about like this more civilized, right? That is not civilized place, right? Versus Afghanistan and stuff. And so it sounds to me like, from what you're describing, because it sounds familiar to me to what's happening in Central America, that the places that are more associated with quote unquote the rule of law are the ones that are more in step with like following all these protocols and all these things. San Francisco is the classic example of the world, right? Like we follow the rules, we follow the law, that's why we are civilized. And it sounds like same here, like the businesses that operate or the people, the communities, the groups of people that operate are used to operating outside of the law, and they know that laws are rigged against them. They tend to like dismiss this, or even though they are, have masks, because this happens in Guatemala, and there is no real enforcement, like from authorities, like government authorities. Even though people are still wearing this, and a lot of people are vaccinated, they still hold this cynicism of laws and policies and authorities, because they're used to getting, the shit out of the stick and being lied to. And, that's why it sounds that, that's why I call it like on the global south, right? Like even in Africa, right? Like we know that Africans have not taken the vaccine, despite what the news says. Like actually, like it's not a shortage of vaccines that's the problem over there. It's like African, even health workers haven't really taken these COVID vaccines. So again, it's not a shortage; it's a rejection of these vaccines. And it seems like a lot of people in the global south actually are rejecting these COVID vaccines, but it does, like you say, Eduardo, like it's still a passport. And we've been talking about this. The elite, the middle class, they get this stuff, and they probably do believe it, because they're more associated with the rule of law of the Europe and the United States. And they didn't themselves see themselves different than those people that don't get it, the savages, and that happens here in San Francisco too. Like that's why I say the global south, right? It's not just geographical; it's just economic for me, because there's plenty of people here that I know that are like operated under the radar, and they're not in our workers and students for choice, because they don't have a voice like that. They have their opinions and their own silent resistance, because they operate outside of the systems in a way, that all four of us have to wrestle with. And I don't know if there's any comments or, what you think of that observation that I just made.
My friend Marius, who lives in right now Cameroon, he shares with me a lot of the stuff that is happening in his country, in Africa, in the continent of Africa. And even though he's not representative of the entire continent, because it's a very big continent, just it gives me a sample of what's happening there. And I get also contacts from Latin America who stay in contact with me, and in my country, right? Like I have this this view from them, from their eyes. And the view from the global south is that this isn't actually their fight. This is what they're more worried about is poverty. They're more worried about what's happening, like, you know, to survive. It's other things. It's
the price of tortilla,
the corruption. Yeah, price of tortilla. Corruption, inflation, the economics of situations, of being oppressed. It's not COVID. This isn't something. So when they hear this stuff, it's of course they're going to bypass anything. They're going to be like, this is, you know, beyond our necessities right now. So it is something that I think global, the most first world country, so to speak, it's their fight, it's their worry, it's their paranoia. And even here, I feel even poor people, it's the working class here in the USA who feel that this isn't something they're worried about. When we were I've said this before many times, when we were at Black Lives Matter, it wasn't that people were afraid of COVID, as some protester I remember saying. It was afraid being shot by the police. It's the police, it's the state that they were more worried about, no? So I think that that's the difference in the way that people see. It's just, you know, you have New Zealand and Australia trying to adopt zero COVID strategies, insane zero COVID strategies, and you have other countries that don't have that they're not invested in it like that because the country wouldn't be able to survive. People wouldn't, they would be an uprising. I imagine if they did have those strategies the way they do in Mexico and in African countries, the way that New Zealand is, they would resist. I would see more fighting happening in those countries because it's already, they're in dire needs, and you're going to oppress them even further. If AMLO did that, or any other of these Latin American countries, then you just have massive uprising because no one would be able to survive with lockdowns. It's always the poor that gets hit harder, and especially in those countries, they would get even hit hardest. You know,
and because they didn't get no stimulus like we did. You know, they didn't print money like the America and you know, in the European countries have done.
Well, I guess then, if I would wonder though, because one of our episodes we had last time was the one where we did the advertising, and it talked about the borderless world, and the borderless world that's going to be constructed by the digital matrix that's being constructed around the globe. If maybe there's not a conception of COVID and mandates, but I would be curious, is there a conception of this other thing that's coming, fourth industrial revolution kinds of things? Because, yeah, I'm curious about that. Like, do you get a sense of, yes, there's a beginning growing awareness, or no, there is not? So
I tried asking those kind of questions. I think I'm not sure. I'm not the, you know, again, I'm not, you know, I'm sort of the way that we're doing this is putting our, like in olden times, you know, you put your finger up here and it's like just your finger using as a thermometer to be able to read the winds or whatever, how cold it is, or whatever, but you need an actual thermometer to know. And so that's what I feel like we are doing right now with me, because I don't represent the entire country, right, in all of Latin America, but in conversing, because I am not just sitting there and having casual conversations, I'm asking very direct and concise questions to bring to this episode. And from all of these conversations, the fourth industrial revolution is not something that is, it's far. And I think it has to do because the lack of internet and many access. I mean, I think what's bringing access to the world of the internet is all of the phones. People do get phones, and people do everything. Even in Africa, people they're making transactions and even using Bitcoin in Africa, right? Like people are using cryptocurrency, and there is a way. And I imagine that if the fourth industrial revolution is going to get a hold, it's going to be in the first world countries, and slowly then in these other countries. I imagine that's my belief. I'm not sure. Even like the ¿cómo se llaman los comprobantes? The proof of vaccination is now we have the new one where it has a QR code. So there is beginnings of it, no? even in restaurants now, you have to have your phone to get the menu with a QR code. So there is an implementation of QR codes, el QR. But I don't know. It feels somewhat far. It's still a bit, and I love it this way. It's still anarchaic. It's still a bit, not as connected as the USA.
And I mean, I'll go ahead. But I guess I would say that hearing that, then I would say there are two sets of fools. There's the fools in the United States who are falling for COVID, and I would say there's the fools in the global South who better get their heads on straight about this fourth industrial revolution, because it is there, and their living standards and working standards. In fact, they're going to be told that things are going to get better for them, and it will get better for them as their living conditions are going to be pitted against somebody whose living conditions are in the first world. But I do feel like they're going to have to get wise to that, because that is something that really, to me, sets apart places like India, where you can hear the awareness among people that they are fighting along multiple fronts. That's that. I think what you're saying, though, does resonate with my experience there. It's almost like they think things are sitting still there, but they are not. They are moving in all across the globe with these plans. That's just what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, Eduardo, on that note, like, is there stuff that kind of worries you, like thinking about your family and just Mexico at large? Like, what concerns you, if anything?
I'll say shortly. I want to hear Kenny's thought on this, but I am afraid that technological progress, is seen as some form of savior, some form of, just say, I don't know how to savior, just say, okay. So most people live on the underground economy. Most people don't have credit cards. Most people don't have even a debit card, don't have a bank account. So people run the country is on the backbone of the underground economy, or the economy that is informal, maybe I should say. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's low. But the belief that to get advanced lies in getting connected. So I think that there will be we should be moving, we should be doing something, but unfortunately people are blinded by wanting to progress because they live in a survival state, that they think this is the way out. Kenny?
Yeah, at least from my view, when you look at the first industrial revolution, the second, the third, the fourth, it's always the economic north. Like the colonial relationships, they're still there. Like these countries, these people, like people in the global south, are still, in their indentured servitude to, the economic system that governs the world, right? So the economic system is not changing. And so I agree with Lipson that, things are not standing still. We talked about digital ID, right? Some years ago, I don't know if it's still true, but I remember like the 2/3 of the global economy happens in the informal sector. And part of digital ID, just like they did in India, right, is to bring the informal economy into the formal economy, and to measure everything so that these bankers, all these capitalists can monetize everything and cannot leave a penny, unaccounted for. And so that's why they drive narratives of, banking for the poor, digital ID for the poor. So the plan is there, and it's not to, I'm sure some people are going to find creative ways to make money in this, in the global south, but by and large is more of the colonial relationship, and actually more minute, more detailed, in not only that, obviously we've talked about the implications of resisting this, right? Because I agree with what Eduardo said, that people in the global south, they're going to look at the price of tortillas. In my country, or in a lot of Latin American countries, if you increase the price of the bus fare, they will raise hell and fucking light shit on fire. Because, a lot of people don't have credit, right? The way that Americans do to supplement the lack of actual income, right? And but that's going to change with the digital economy by connecting so many people. Because again, remember the technological leaps. Like India didn't have to create the infrastructure of cellular, no, telephone lines, right? They just jumped that technological hurdle, and so cell phones are everywhere. Everyone has a cell phone, and so everyone is potentially already has the basic tool to join this world economy that is coming. So I think it will come. I think the enforcers are the global north, the people that the rule of law people, the people in San Francisco, the high class in those countries that have ties and investments in these countries, right, to sustain their lives. So yeah, it's coming. It's just I do think that there is some obliviousness to it, because people are by and large just trying to hustle to survive, and I do think in some ways, I mean, it makes sense for them, like, to not even resist it, because everyone's trying to hustle, like, to make it, and so, I mean, what I'm saying is more of the same. It's just the same countries that have already extracted from the country, except that people are the biggest source of raw materials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, being a Marxist materialist, like, yeah, you can create all this bullshit technology, but it still comes back to the resources that needed to create this. Where are the resources in the global south? So there is war, there is poverty, there is extraction, there is surveillance coming, to the south as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, kind of the last couple of points aside, it sounds like you had a really wonderful time, and I love hearing, just like the stuff about sense of humor. I don't think that should be underestimated, sometimes on an individual level and on a collective level. I mean, that is like a lifeline, for sure. And yeah, Americans don't have the best sense of humor. I can say that because I'm from England originally. But
are you? So I think you would know what it means to be. So they have the different and the subtle humor as well. If you're from
yeah,
England,
I mean,
it's different from here in the USA.
It's different. I mean, there's still, there's still a white Western, center of empire. But yeah, for sure. I mean, my half my family's in England, half my family's in America, and yeah, I mean, the Brits, they don't talk about stuff in the same way. Yeah, there's just a much more of a sense of humor, and sometimes it's dark. But anyway, what I was going to ask was just, coming back, like you talked at the beginning about, feeling nostalgia and that, but I don't know, like, what's next for you? I mean, it must be really, I don't know, just to come back here and see like how out of touch so many people are, how, yeah, I don't know. I just like, what's on your mind in terms of what's next for you?
I think for me now, well, first of all, this isn't the first time I've traveled. This is the first time maybe in 2 years, Andy, that I've been gone this long. But I think last time, the other times I was traveling during What's Left, I had time, I'd made time to record. And this time I didn't. I decided to be selfish and not make any time to record. I made time in Spain and in Mexico. And where else? I forget where, but it was somewhere else.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so I want to just clarify that I have been traveling before, even when What's Left. I just wanted to be selfish. Let's see.
You did it in France.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I just didn't make the time this time, huh? Well, what's next?
How do you feel about that? I mean, you say it's selfish. I mean, I'm curious.
I was exhausted. I think lots of things from last year. Feeling, even though I have What's Left, I have you all here. I have just thinking about my community from having been severed from them, and the hypocrisy, the pushing, the politics, it just made me feel exhausted, and I wanted to be amongst people who don't have that level of thinking. So I just wanted to be there with my family. And I have so many cousins, and I have close friendships and relationships that I don't need to worry. I don't need to worry about people who don't want to be in a relationship with you just because of COVID. Right. So to the question that Jessica's posed, I think now that I'm back, I after a break, after having some time off, I think what's next for me, obviously, to continue with you all. I'm very happy that we're going to continue this, and as well as to see what's happening at the local level. I've been contacted by many families that I, unfortunately, hopefully they will not see this, but I have not been in close contact with them as I was before. So I have to do that again, maybe build some trust again. They probably thought I abandoned them. I did explain that I was in another country, so they understood. But I want to organize. So I want to go back and see. I don't know if I feel lots of things have happened, like the truckers convoy, which was amazing. I was from far away. I was just reading and paying attention. I also heard some of the episodes with you all. Thank you, Jessica, for bringing up Julian Assange in one of the episodes. I forget which one. And hearing about his case. It would also, a break from having listened to Democracy Now! And KPFA and the BBC News really gave me a chance to sort of clear my head a bit from all that liberal talk. And re-listening to that just made me think, oh goodness, I could use my time listening to something else. So I want to organize again in SF, see what's happening with families. I'm glad there's going to be lifting of masks in the state, but I'm not sure SF is going to adopt it. So I want to see. I know today London Mayor Breed of SF came out and she said that she was encouraging for the lifting of masks in schools. I think there'll be a resistance from teachers, and I imagine that will be another front I have to take on. And let's see, just that. I think that's organizing. I also came back a bit more inspired to finish some of the writings that I've left undone. So see if I can finish that. My garden is dead, by the way. Just I came back, everything's dead. No one knows how to take care of plants. Everyone who I assigned specific plants to, or I assigned working duties, or when to water, it's not simple, is it? Everything, even lavender that can survive anything, is dead. Rosemary dried up. I'll just have to collect the leaves and use that as part of, for seasoning. But I'm very disappointed in my family and people who I left to take care of my plants. I don't have kids, I don't have dogs, but I asked them to do that. They couldn't even do that.
I think you should sever those relationships. Not much has changed here. Like maybe we are frozen in time, and yeah. So, but yeah, it'll be
cool. That's how I feel. I feel like, oh my god, like Eduardo's coming back, and we're all just like sitting here having the same conversations, like same stupid crap, right? Like different propaganda, but the same propaganda. Not getting through to people. I think you're right, Kenny. I think if anyone's frozen in time, it's us.
I can tell you that I'm jealous. Like, at the time you got to spend with your family, I mentioned my own episode, right, when we talked about my trip to Canada, and like that's important. It's grounding, especially if, like I echo or what you said about being tired, and like you've been going at this for a long time with what's left, and like the community stuff and job, and it takes a toll. So I'm glad that you got into do that. You get into, like have some, I guess, sense of normalcy, right? Like just everything's so bizarre here, especially in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know when you got back, like last week, right? So maybe you need more time to get back to the dead plants here. So, and so then maybe we'll ask you this question again later.
Yeah. And I don't think, I mean, you said something about like something along the lines of like feeling like you abandoned, families in San Francisco and stuff like that. And I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, I think what are we fighting for if you're not there in Mexico with your family and being present and not having to log on here every week for a few months? I mean, if you don't have that, then what are we doing? And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of jealous too. Like, I'm really happy, but I wish I had that. Like, I wish I had family like that. I mean, I love my family and I have lots to be thankful for too. But I think it's just as important. Like, yeah, like Kenny, your episode where you talked about going to Canada and those experiences. And yeah, I mean, it's just a really important reminder. Like, this is what what it is to be human. So you didn't abandon anyone.
I feel reinvigorated, re-energized to continue the fight and to face people. I felt a little bit like I was cowering a bit towards the end with administrators and teachers at my nephew's school when schools reopened for the beginning of the school year. And then now I feel I can face that. Being away just like gave me space, being away just sort of allowed me to
gotta have different seasons of the mind and seasons of experience.
And I think at this point, like more than all of us here, like what green plants look like, just to keep going with that metaphor, because I think like a lot of shit has died here that people don't realize is beyond, it's like that it needs care, right? And people just take these wilted plants and think that that's life. And that I think that I'm just glad that you got 2 months, and I'm gonna find a way to do it for myself too.
Yes, yeah, almost 3 months, close to 3 months, right? Because December to the end of February, well, to the end of last week, almost got it.
Anything else? Well, first, were there any episodes that stuck out for you from what's left?
Oh, I can't remember them at this moment.
And that's the
pop quiz.
Jeez.
That's fine. That's fine.
I said I disconnected.
That's fine.
I remember listening to 2 of them.
But I will say that you should probably brush up on the Ukraine episode that we did, because I think that's what we're going to talk about next week.
Okay. All right.
Because I certainly thought things would go differently than they have, and I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, you did express that once we spoke. Mm-hmm.
But the good thing is that Ukraine cured COVID on the news for a while.
Yeah, Putin found the cure.
Yeah.
But Eduardo, it's good to have you back, and I hope to see you in person.
Yes, we'll do something. I'm going to attend one of the workers and students for choice meetings at your house. I've seen that you started posting them.
Yeah,
we were at your house for some time.
I hope we can get together, you and I, but we'll see if we can figure that out.
Sure.
Okay.
And we have
Jessica.
We have a trip plan, remember?
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a hike. Yeah, as well. that as well. So I hope to see you both. And Jessica, you've moved, right?
Yeah, I moved. I guess I moved like right as you were leaving, or a little bit before. But yeah, I moved beginning of November. I moved just from Washington to Oregon. But it's a really different, like very, very rural community. I'm like in the middle of nowhere.
My goodness.
So yeah, lots of changes.
How far away are you from Eugene? Because I stayed there for some time.
Like a long way. I'm like almost in Idaho. Okay. Where were you at when you were in Idaho? I gotta look up where that town is.
I was in Emmett, Idaho, close to Boise, but it was in a small town outside of Boise.
Okay. Yeah, so
Emmett.
Boise is the closest like city to me, and it's like 2 hours away.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really hard to fly. Like whenever I want to start traveling again, if I ever freaking start traveling again. But they just dropped some of the requirements for the UK, which is good because I've been thinking about that for like 2 years. But I don't know. I'm not as like comfortable testing as I think some of you guys are. I've only done one test all of COVID, and it was very, very, very against my will. I don't know. It's probably stupid, but
no,
yeah,
it's messed up.
Yeah.
Well, at least Boris Johnson did what he did so that you can travel there, because I think the restrictions would have lasted had he not done all his stuff. Let's end this episode. I'll end it with the outro.
Yes. Okay. Welcome back, Eduardo. It's good to have you back.
Yeah.
Thank you. I also got a haircut.
Looks good. Your hair looks good.
Good, yeah.
So I had long hair, now I'm cutting short.
You're a little more tan. It looks...
Yeah, I'm like, oh man, go south.
Everyone should go south.
Vitamin D, it cures COVID.
Yes. All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast /channel challenge the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes where we found this episode, or on our blog at what-s-left.webnote.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast /channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our 8 platforms on podcast, Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, or the channels Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, or you can find us on Telegram. And
we've added Rumble.
And Rumble. All right. And Rumble. Thank you. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts Kenny Cepeda, Andy Lipson, and Jess. Thank you very much for being with us. And again, I'm glad to be working with Jess in the future. Thank you for listening.
And it's great to have you doing the intro and outro. It's not as easy as it looks. No. You do it very well.
Someone else should try it.
No. It's Eduardo's job. All right. See you.
Ciao.
All right.